Hi, Bonnie here, pouring some wisdom into your life and your day. We are on, gosh, I forgot what chapter it was. 9, maybe? Childhood is the chapter that I'm just giving you some takeaways and ideas that I think are important from A Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century. I'm really enjoying this book. I'm about just over halfway, and I have a huge page of notes today because this I agree with so much, and it was so insightful, and some of the stuff surprised me and some of the stuff that I knew already. And so we'll just dive into some of the things that they talked about that I think are important that more voices are sharing. So childhood, it's all about exploring and learning. They talk about the importance of play, how various different species have an aspect of play where the young are goofing off with each other and learning, and it's a risky thing to do because it attracts predators. So parents allow this play to happen and maintain this vigilance so that they can keep their kids safe, which goes to show you that it's an adaptive thing. It's something that's really important if the resources are being maintained so that the young can engage in that kind of behavior. So that's kind of how they started the chapter. And they talk about how some species are more flexible than others and what that means. And they gave a really great example between different kinds of birds. So some migrating birds specifically. So birds that lay their eggs and then they're gone, and the eggs hatch, become young, and they migrate on their own. They are pre-programmed with the instructions on what they need to do and where they need to go. So they don't have anyone to learn from. So they instinctively know what they're doing and they migrate. And then there's birds that migrate that nurture and take care of their young, and generations migrate together. So the parents are with the young, guiding them and following them. And what they've found is that the adaptability of the species that migrate intergenerationally is way better. So if something changes in the environment and you need to go a different way in your migration, the ones that travel as family units are better able to navigate that and more consistently pick the better route. Whereas the ones that have just come pre-programmed are stuck on a loop, and like if the lake has changed, they still go, past the lake and then kind of get confused and various things because the landscape has changed and they are relying on their programming. So the evolution of parent and child and the learning that happens in children is it's a very successful way to ensure that your species thrives over a long span of time. So I thought that was really interesting and a really great example. And the other one that I thought was a really cool example that I'm getting excited about and passionate about in my life as a parent with my toddler is how the environment that you grow up in changes your physiology. So they talk about hyenas. Wild hyenas, when they grow up, they have really robust skulls and particular features that they develop that muscles can attach to that support their jaws and their teeth. So you can imagine hyenas in the wild need to bare their teeth, expose their teeth in order to communicate with each other, either in fun or also, when they're showing dominance. And when they see hyenas that are raised in captivity, they don't develop those structures. Their skulls are not as robust and they don't have that. Well, isn't that interesting? And they see the same things in humans. And the authors of the book, they only did a small little chapter on this, but I've been reading about this in other books, and it is a huge deal. And more parents need to know about it, particularly new moms need to know about this. So they see that humans that have grown up as children on a soft food diet have smaller skulls and smaller jaws and smaller airways. And it leads into a whole host of challenges. Whereas kids that have had to chew and have gnawed on things and have harder food to eat, develop their muscles more, and their physical structures, their jaws are bigger, there's space for their teeth, their palates are well defined. Like, it's a really big deal. And I know because I just, in the last year, is when I introduced my son to food. There's all kinds of theories out there and how parents are helping each other, and what should you do? How do you introduce food to your baby? What about choking? Like, there's all of this stuff. There's a lot of anxiety for new parents in how they should introduce food because they don't want their kids to choke. And there's a great misunderstanding, I think, in how children learn to eat and what behavior is normal and what is abnormal, what's actually choking, and why just, applesauce food and really soft foods is not the way to go. It's detrimental to the development of the kids. And I don't know how we can politely discuss that and get information out there without simultaneously unintentionally shaming parents that have chosen a specific way for the reasons that they did. And it's important that we do get that information out there, because continuing to just have formula and then soft food is leading, like, there's a lot of health outcomes, negative health outcomes that come from not having a defined enough palate and a clear airway for breathing. Like, it's a big deal. So they didn't talk about it as much in this chapter. It was just kind of a little line, but I thought, I know where they're going with that. That is really important. So I'm passionate about that. The next thing that was really cool, they talk about this concept of how humans are anti-fragile. So fragile is a really obvious thing. We know what fragility is. Like, eggs are fragile. If you drop them, they break, right? Like, delicate things are fragile. But anti-fragile is a more abstract concept, because it's not really the opposite. Like, it's not just hard. But what anti-fragile means is that when you encounter something, it actually makes you stronger. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger is kind of an anti-fragile. So the more that you have minor falls, or you take manageable risks, you develop the skills to be able to deal with bigger and bigger risks later, and you become unbreakable, essentially. And so humans are an anti-fragile species, caveat, so long as we allow our kids to have some risk in their childhood. And we haven't quite gotten there maybe yet, because my son is still, he's like 2.5. But there's this concept called helicopter parents, and I don't think anyone chooses to be a helicopter parent, but it's this idea of managing the safety of my kid and making sure that my kid is safe at all times. And when other kids have disagreement on the playground, I'll step in and I'll protect their feelings, and I will make sure I help them navigate the communication, and everyone will take turns, and everyone is welcome, and participation, like all of that kind of stuff. When adults intervene, we're actually robbing them of the skills that they are going to learn to become anti-fragile and deal with these problems as adults. So it's another really important thing that I think somehow we need to get back into our culture, because the consequences of keeping people too clean and keeping people too safe is long-term detrimental to our mental health and our physical health. So collectively, let's get on that. And another one that just leads exactly into that is they talk about being aware and beware of using inanimate objects as babysitters. So they're talking specifically about screens. Anything that looks to a child like they could be alive, but technically isn't. And they don't mean like the characters are dead and ghosts and things like that. What they mean as live in person, can they actually react to you? So imagine that you're a small child, you have a developing brain, and you're watching people on TV. They look like they're alive. They look like your parents look like when you're watching them. But there's one key difference that is affecting, or the authors posit that it's affecting our childhood development. And that is that the characters on TV are not reacting to you, right? So there's some where there's like kind of a break the fourth wall, let's react, but they're not reacting correctly. They're kind of guessing. So for example, Blue's Clues, I think it's a great show. He looks at the audience, he asks for the participation of the kids, great learning is happening. But what isn't happening is if the kid does something different than what's expected, an adult would change their reaction. And so the authors hypothesize that we are seeing a rise in the inability to manage social interactions among kids and adolescents and adults. And they think that that is because we're seeing more and more TVs as babysitters. And the kids, that the message that is getting sent is that the world isn't an emotionally responsive place. Let me say that again. The world isn't an emotionally responsive place. And I think that that is something to really think about and take care of, because I'm guilty of it too. There are times it's a busy day, I just need to like get dinner going, and when Arthur is playing and exploring and spilling, watering on the plants and peeing on the floor, and now the dog is something like, it's just chaos and it distracts me. And it is so much easier when I can put on Bluey or Blue's Clues and he's sitting there and he's engaged and I can get stuff done. It is so easy. I can really see how parents can lose track of how much time their kids are spending in front of the TV because of that. It's so easy to do, and we really need to think about the long-term consequences of that and what the kids are learning and what some of the unintended consequences are. Because some of it is great, like learning songs and like learning some sign language. Like there is learning that's happening, but we need to make sure that we're teaching them about emotional responsiveness as well. So I thought that was an important part of the chapter that they highlighted. Okay, what else? Oh gosh, sleep. Talking about sleep. And so again, in parenting, there are all kinds of ideas about what is good sleep and correct sleep and biologically appropriate sleep. What should my kids be doing? How can we manage the sleep? How can we ensure our kids sleep more, et cetera, et cetera. And one of them is called sleep training. So I apologize to those of you who are not parents and don't care about any of this. But you might get there one day, and knowing about this, planting the seed, and then coming back for when it's relevant to you is great. So sleep training, and there's all kinds of different ones. The gentle method, and I don't know because I didn't do any sleep training, but there's a wide variety. And essentially, the proponents of it say that you are allowing your child to learn how to self-soothe. I have not agreed with that method. It's too hard for me to do that. I have a different method of helping my son sleep. And then the authors talk about how that isn't rooted in evolutionary biology. There isn't a time in our long history of humanity and species and all of the species that are related to us where leaving a child or a young part of our species, the youth, the toddlers, I don't know what you call like a baby chimp. We're gonna say child. When you leave that child alone to just figure it out and go to sleep. So if you think about it from that lens, that evolutionary lens, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. And so here's another thing where we need to think about what the long-term consequences are. What are the kids really learning? Are they learning how to self-soothe? Or are they crying and trying to figure out if they're safe and don't know and are realizing, well, maybe no one is coming to save me. Maybe I'm alone. Like, we don't really know what they're learning, even though the proponents say, oh yeah, they're learning how to self-soothe. So take that for what you want. I think it's an important discussion to have. I think that it's hard to talk about because sleep is very hard and sleep deprivation in parents is very hard. And we certainly don't want to be shaming people for their choices, but we also want to make sure we're setting humans up to thrive and not just survive. And a lot of what we're doing in parenting is like, well, I did this and I'm okay. But like you could have been awesome instead of just okay. So anyway, we'll move on from that. Oh gosh, this chapter was so good. Okay. They touch on a little bit about social media. And their recommendation, the tips at the end of the chapter, is to limit your posting of your kids on social media. But they came at it from a really unique perspective. So it's not just a safety thing, which is obviously important. And it's not just a comparison thing, again, which is obviously important. You don't want, keeping up with the Joneses. But the thing that I hadn't thought about that really like hit me in the face was this is the first time in human history where we have really been able to compare our current self with our past self. Like we're really immortalizing and allowing exposure to our past self. We haven't had that before. And childhood is it's a time of tremendous change and development. Like I'm not even close to the person that I was at 14. Like I've just learned so much and I've become way more confident in myself and my abilities and like my looks and how I feel in my body and just all of these things. And so they don't give any predictions about like what might happen, because I think we're currently in this moment right now. We don't really know what this is going to do to our psychology. But that is something to think about. Like what does that mean when your sort of 17-year-old self is comparing to your 13-year-old self, and when you were 13 you were like posting what you thought was awesome or what you imagined other people thought was awesome, and you're not full of integrity with yourself or authentic, and you're curating like it's. And then what is that doing to the psychology and your development? Like our brains develop for ages. So I have no solutions and no ideas and no thoughts, and like it's just kind of percolating in my brain, but something to really think about. So that was really cool. And then they have a list of tips at the end, and there were lots of them, but the two that I thought were really important for me that I'm going to really take into heart, and I kind of already do, which is maybe why I picked them, because I'm already doing them. But one of them is to give your kids real tasks that allow them to participate. So not just busy work and like pretend, but when you're doing something that they can help, allow them to help. Or better yet, like try to figure out how to let them help always, So Arthur helps me cook, and I've tried to let him crack the eggs, and that is, if you've seen that Bluey episode where Bingo's helping, it's exactly like that. So instead of him cracking the eggs, he takes the eggshell into the compost for me. So there's ways to sort of modify to have the kids help. He loves helping with laundry, sweeping and cleaning, picking up dog poop is like his favorite activity right now. So that's great for me. So I love that was part of their suggestion. And then the other one, which we hear all the time, be the change you want to see in the world, kind of like that. But be the adult that you want your kids to develop into, because they're watching you and they're going to mimic what you do. And so really making sure that you know what your values are and your behavior matches your values. And it's not, well, we really value dinner together as a family, but we eat in front of the TV every day, which, that might be my family. Like, Bonnie, you need to hear yourself and rewatch this video, because it, again, is easy, right? I'm tired at the end of the day. So making sure that we're really leading by example for the kids. So that was my takeaways for this chapter. It was like pretty detailed. It was a really great chapter. I didn't look ahead, so I don't know what the next chapter is, but I'll let you know in the next video. Have a magical day. Bye.